booktube, it's Breckie from Breckie Writes. This is Breckie Reads, and this is my January 2017 wrap-up video. January was a surprisingly good reading month. I read 15 books last month, which is kind of crazy. I meant to read 10, I read 15, a great start to the new year. Now I'm gonna break this up into the audiobooks and the physical books that I read before Diversathon, and then everything I read and Diversathon and afterwards. Now I started January by finishing up the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series by Riordan. I read The Titan's Curse, The Battle of the Labyrinth, and The Last Olympian. I enjoyed all three of these audiobooks. They were just such a fun conclusion to the series. Each one continued to show Percy as he grew as a young man, but they still had this sense of silliness and fun. I was thinking a lot about how similar the Percy Jackson books were to Harry Potter, and the biggest difference I found, honestly, is that Percy Jackson stayed really silly and fun. It didn't turn into a dark story in the way that Harry Potter did. They didn't really mature. They stayed very much a middle grade book, and I appreciate that for the story it was trying to tell. I really enjoyed how the characters matured, and I am excited about reading the new series. This was just a really fun way to conclude the series. In The Titan's Curse, Percy Jackson meets a brand new Titan that is plotting alongside Kronos and meets some new gods and goddesses, and he has to go and find Annabelle, who is missing, as well as a goddess who is also gone missing. And I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. In the Battle of the Labyrinth, Percy Jackson goes into the famed labyrinth of Daedalus and the Minotaur to find Daedalus and to try and thwart Luke and Kronos from entering the camp. In the labyrinth, he forges some new alliances and meets some new friends and some new enemies, and develops a deeper relationship with Grover and Annabelle and his brother. And I gave the Battle of the Labyrinth 4 out of 5 stars. Finally, The Last Olympian concludes the series with Percy Jackson and his friends making their final stand against Kronos and his armies. The full prophecy is revealed and Percy's part in it, and it really does a nice job of tying up all the pieces, of having a few twists and turns, although I kind of guessed them pretty early on, but I'm also probably twice the age of the average reader. I thought it was really fun. I thought it laid the groundwork for the next series seamlessly, and I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next audiobook I read was Hamilton, The Revolution by Jesamyn, McCarter, and Lin-Manuel Miranda. Now yes, I did listen to it as an audiobook, and there is something to be said about missing all the pictures and the way everything is laid out. Lin-Manuel Miranda does not read the whole audiobook. The audiobook is actually read by Marissa, who is the lady cop on Law & Order SVU, but Lin-Manuel Miranda reads the liner notes, which don't come off quite as well as if you are physically reading them along with all the photographs and everything, but it's still fabulous. I loved it. It's the history and the coming together of the play and how all the different people kind of got involved and where the idea came from, and basically how it evolved into the phenomena and how it almost wasn't what it is. It was going to be a mixtape. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I am pretty sure that I gave it a biased 5 stars. I'd be curious if I went back and reread it in like a year or two if I would be as excited about it, but I loved the whole process of this book. It was also the first book to fulfill my TBR jar challenge, which was to read a book by a person of color. Lin-Manuel Miranda is Puerto Rican American, so there we go. And my TBR jar challenge is only going to get more fulfilled from this point going forward. Okay, then the next audiobook I listened to was Heartless by Marissa, Meyer. This is a standalone villain origin story telling us the background to Catherine, the Queen of Hearts in the Alice in Wonderland books. This is how she went from being an average everyday girl to being a heartless queen that says off with their head. Now, I ended up giving Heartless 3.5 stars. There were things I loved about this book. I think that there was a great deal of whimsy that was well captured, and I think that there were characters that were rounded and beautiful and fun, but there was something that I just couldn't connect with. And maybe it's because it's a villain origin story, and so you know before the book starts that the main character who you're sort of told to sympathize with is going to end up being evil, and you know something terrible has to happen for her to end up being so evil, and it's true. This book was also really long, and I felt that it dragged, and I felt that there was way too much emphasis placed on things that weren't important and not enough emphasis placed on the things that were important, and I just didn't love it. I will say I loved that Catherine is a baker and that she is this sort of unusual character in her life. I loved the audiobook, and the woman who read the audiobook did a fantastic job with all the voices. I wish we'd seen more of the Mad Hatter and his whole Tea Party crowd. I just felt like the things that I was most interested in were the things that the book did not focus much on, and so video, I was like, why are we reading about this thing when I want to read about something else? And that was where I felt with it. I didn't find it a bad book. I didn't find myself not enjoying it. I did find myself frustrated because of the nature of a villain origin story, and I just didn't find myself loving it the way that I loved the Lunar Chronicles. So again, I gave it 3.5 stars. All right, those are the audiobooks that I read at the beginning of the month. Here are some of the physical books I read before Diversathon. The first one was Traditional Kitchen Wisdom, Techniques, Recipes for Living a Simpler, More Sustainable Life, edited by Andrea Jesamyn. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. This is a hobby book. This is a book on like how to do stuff in your kitchen, like can your own jam and make your own bread and stuff like that. It was okay. Any good cookbook is gonna have all this info, so yeah, it's something worth having on the shelves if you do a lot of cooking, but not necessary. Then I read Wayfarer by Alexandra Bracken. Now I have done a spoiler-free review of this, which I will make sure to link down below so you can check it out if you want to. And Wayfarer is the follow-up to Passenger, which came out last January, which I loved, was one of my favorite books of 2016. And I went into this with super high expectations that were not quite met. I would not say this is a bad book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, but this to me just did not meet my expectations. There was a lot of focus on melodrama. There was a lot of focus on internal dialogue rather than the ways in which the characters were interacting. I felt that it was a little bit anticlimactic, so I can't say that I loved this the same way that I loved Passenger. It was still a fun read. It was still a fast-paced, get your breath, oh my goodness, what's gonna happen next kind of read. This is also more than 500 pages, so it fulfills one of my yearly challenges, but this was a little bit of a disappointment because I expected this to be a 5-star read, and it definitely was not. Then I read perhaps my other most anticipated book of the month, and that was Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. Finally, you guys, finally I read Crooked Kingdom. I've done a spoiler-free review. You can check it out down below. I have a lot of feels about this. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. This is the sequel to Six of Crows. It picks up where Six of Crows ends, and there's mayhem, and there's craziness, and there's gunpowder, and fighting on tightropes, and just all the things. This starts out with such a strong note. The first 3 chapters in this are absolutely incredible, and it doesn't let you go from there. There's only a couple of critiques I would make of this, and I discussed them in my wrap-up video, and they are minor. They really are. They're minor. I loved this. I've heard that Leigh Bardugo's coming out with a collection of short stories that take place in the Grishaverse. I hope some of our precious babies make an appearance in that collection. But I loved everything about Crooked Kingdom. I could rave about it in this whole video, but we have a lot to get through. I don't have time for that. 5 out of 5 stars. Loved this book. After I finished Crooked Kingdom, it was time to jump into Diversathon. I read 6 books for Diversathon, and I'm going to go through them really quickly. I've already done a wrap-up video for Diversathon, so if you want more of my thoughts, I will link that down below, but quickly, the books I read for Diversathon are Hidden Figures by Margot Shatterly, and I gave that 4 out of 5 stars. The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin, I gave that 4 out of 5 stars. The Fire This Time, edited by Jesamyn Ward, and I gave that 4 out of 5 stars. And the last audiobook I read for Diversathon was Dreams from My Father, which is a memoir by Barack Obama. Now, this was originally published in 1995, so it is a precursor to all of his political fame, and I loved it and gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead, and I think I'm gonna give this 3.5 stars. I still haven't decided, you guys. Lumberjanes Volume 4 by Noelle Stevenson, and I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee, Ahdieh, and I gave this 4.5 stars. Those 6 books were the books that I read for Diversathon. Again, you can check out my review down below. I read 1 more book before the end of the month, and that was The Rose and the Dagger by Renee, Ahdieh. I think I finished this at like 12:35 a.m. on February 1st, but I'm counting it for January, you guys. I did not enjoy this as much as the first one. What is it with sequels just not able to live up to the first one? Yet again, I was expecting awesomeness and perfection and wonderfulness, and this book just didn't deliver. I have a lot of thoughts on this book, but suffice it to say, the world of The Wrath and the Dawn is one of the best fantasy worlds I've encountered in a long time. It is set in a pre-Islamic Arabia. It is round and full. The atmosphere is incredible. I really felt like I was in this fantasy world. I love Shazi. I loved Khalid. I loved Tariq. I even liked the love triangle, and I don't like love triangles, and I thought it worked here. But this book had so much going on for it. She creates about 5 or 6 subplots and sort of ways the plot is going forward, but she only focuses on like 2 of them. And one of them is a subplot that involves Shazi's little sister, which is pointless, and I think she spends way too much of the book on it and not enough of the book on people like Artan Temujin and his importance to the story and how the destruction of the thing, which I'm not going to tell you because spoilers, helps to do things with Shazi and Arten and his aunt and all the things. Like, there's no follow-up to that. The entire sister subplot irritated the living daylights out of me, to the point where I was like, this book would be so much better, it would be shorter, and you could spend more time on these other things if you would just cut out the sister subplot. It was pointless, and I hated it. I'm pretty passionate about how angry it made me, because it meant that she wasn't focusing on the whole magic subplot in a way that I thought would have been useful, her whole father's subplot that I think would have been useful, the Despotina subplot that I think that would have been useful. These things were left by the wayside in a way that felt careless and messy, and there was so much emphasis placed on the sisters subplot that just took away from the story. And I was hoping for this to be a 5 out of 5 stars. I was anticipating that this would be a 5-star read. I had every belief going into this book that I was going to give it 5 out of 5 stars because I loved The Wrath and the Dawn. Rose and the Dagger just did not deliver for me. I ultimately think that this lands somewhere on between a 3 and a 3.5. On a sentence by sentence level, this is a pretty well written book, and it is a wonderfully developed world, and the characters are still compelling, but it's messy and it is hastily written, and there's an emphasis on all the wrong things in my opinion. So I'm just not sure. It's somewhere between a 3 and a 3.5. It's at minimum a 3, but it might be up to a 3.5. I'm still meditating on it because I'm still kind of grouchy about it. And there you have it, guys. Those are all the books that I read in January. 15 books. Now, the majority of them were audiobooks, and I'm able to get through a lot more audiobooks, especially when I'm doing things around the house. I've been baking bread and cooking a lot more, and I listen to audiobooks when I do that. Last year, I read 16 books in January, and 5 of them were the Spiderwick Chronicles, so you guys know that I am doing really, really well this year. Comment down below and let me know how your January reading month went, and let me know what your favorite book of the month was. My favorite was Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. Obviously it was Crooked Kingdom. Like, obviously. Was anybody surprised by this? Nobody was surprised by this. I loved this book. I hope you guys are all doing well, and I will talk to you all very soon. Bye!